else that concerns the Channel, one of your flagship policies and the Prime Minister's slogan to stop the boats. Now, you said it's possible that 80,000 people will come across the Channel in small boats this year, but you've promised it will end. But can you just honestly say this morning, it's not going to end this year in 2023?
Well, the Prime Minister's made the key pledge to stop the boats. It's going to be pretty obvious when we've succeeded in achieving that. I'm not going to put clear dates on everything. We've got to take the steps as they evolve. We've introduced a legislation very recently in the last few weeks that will make clear that if you arrive here illegally, you'll be detained and swiftly removed. We've reached a record deal with the French, and we are also moving forward and making progress on our asylum backlog. We've just announced new sites this week. So we have to abide by various timelines in Parliament or in court, but as quickly as possible is my ambition.
But it's not going to be this year, realistically, because of what you've set out. This is a long process.
As I said, I'm not going to put a firm date on it. We need to do what's next. We're in court. Our partnership with Rwanda is currently in litigation. We won in the High Court emphatically at the end of last year. We're now being appealed. There's a hearing later this month. We need to wait for the court to adjudicate. I can't control court deadlines, and therefore we will respect any decision from the court, but we have to abide by the timeline set by the judges.
And we'll talk a bit about that more in a few minutes' time. But your plan is to detain migrants who come to this country without permission. How many people are you expecting to detain, and where are you going to put them? So you have announced a couple of new sites this week, but right now there's only space for a couple of thousand people. So where are they going to go?
Well, let's be clear that our scheme to detain and swiftly remove does not require 50,000 new detention places. The government is in no way planning to do that. What we need to do
what happens if 50,000 people arrive?
We do need to increase our detention estate. We've got several thousand places already that we use, and we've got capacity there. We will need to increase some of our detention capacity. But what we believe to work is that once we are able to relocate people from the UK to Rwanda, pursuant to our world-leading deal, that will have a significant deterrent effect, and people will stop making the journey in the first place. They'll stop paying the evil people smuggling gangs in the first place, and numbers will come down. And that's not just a speculation. That's actually born out of experience of other countries who rolled out a similar scheme, for example, Australia.
And that is what you hope will happen, but there are still concerns that you will need many more places. Now, there are reports this morning that a deal has been done to have a barge with the Portland Port Authority, so there'd be a floating barge with migrants. Is it true that that deal has been struck to site a barge in that part of the country?
Forgive me, I'm not going to get into the details of private commercial negotiations. We announced
in the newspapers this morning. You can tell us if it's true or not.
We're talking to a lot of operators, a lot of owners of lots of different kinds of property around the country. We've announced sites earlier this week. Those are sites where we have a level of confidence. We're able to be public about those sites. We're aiming to roll out those sites very quickly and start making them fit for accommodation purposes and relocate people onto those sites for asylum purposes. But we're looking at all options. We're looking at all sorts of land and sites and vessels, and we're in negotiations with a high number of operators around the country.
But would you expect there to be migrants housed in that part of the country? Because the local MP there does think this is going to happen, and he also says it shouldn't happen.
I'm not going to confirm, and I'm not going to preempt our private commercial discussions. You'll have to wait a little bit longer.
Okay, there's a tension here, though, isn't there, Home Secretary? Because you and the Prime Minister talk very regularly about bringing down migration, in particular bringing an end to the terrible trade of people crossing the Channel and being exploited by people smugglers. Except that the government has also just presided over 500,000 people coming here last year, 250,000 people expected to come next year. So although we're hearing the government taking what you, I think, would say is a tougher line on immigration, tougher all the time, actually more people than ever before are coming to the UK.
I don't think it's fair to conflate illegal migration with legal migration. These are two very different cohorts of people. We've taken back control over our migration rules after Brexit. We set up a points-based system, and therefore we have made, as a government, the decision to issue visas for work or study purposes, depending on legitimate rules that we have set up. that is very different to people coming here illegally, putting their lives at risk, paying evil people smuggling gangs, breaking our rules, and coming here to game our system. Those cannot be considered in the same, together in the same way.
Except many of our viewers this morning might think, well, hang on a minute, we did vote, many of them, to take back control of immigration, and for many people that meant immigration coming down. And indeed, for you said in October you wanted immigration to come down to the tens of thousands. Now, is that still what you would like?
Our manifesto commitment is very clear that we want to get overall numbers down. And
but do you still believe it should be in the tens of thousands? Because that's what you said just a few months ago.
It is legitimate to question whether the levels of lawful migration are sustainable. We've issued a record number of work and study visas in the last year. We've had the highest level of net migration. We've got 7 million people already in the UK who are out of work. You've just heard from speakers there talking about labour market shortages. We have to get the balance right. We need to incentivise people already here to get back into the labour market, and we need to get the balance right between the number of people coming in, for labour purposes.
But I think our viewers this morning will want to know, Home Secretary, if you, as the person in charge of the system, believe that legal migration should be in the tens of thousands rather than the 500,000 it was this year. It's a clear question. Do you still think that immigration should be in the tens of thousands?
The clear answer I can give you is that I support our manifesto commitment to get overall migration numbers down, including legal migration.
But you said
so
in
I do believe,
have you changed your mind?
believe that we have, the high levels of the high numbers of people coming in through work and study routes is high. It places pressure on housing and accommodation supply. It places pressure on school places, on health services. Those are reasonable concerns, and we need to make sure that we're getting the balance right of encouraging our domestic workforce back into the labour market, and also ensuring that we do allow those highly skilled workers, those people who will come and help various sectors in our economy to thrive.
Let's talk then about your plan for migrants to go to Rwanda. I know you're proud of the deal that you've done with the Rwandan government, and you're happy about the arrangements that you've made with that government. But if migrants do end up there from the UK, if you get your way in the courts, if they're not happy, should they be able to protest about their living conditions once they get there?
Well, our scheme makes it clear that if you come here illegally, you're going to be detained and thereafter swiftly removed to a safe country, or to a country from which you came if it's safe. Rwanda is our first choice of country to which we want to relocate you. Rwanda is a safe country. That's been upheld authoritatively by the High Court. We're in an appeal process, but there's an emphatic judgment and analysis by senior judges who have looked at Rwanda, looked at our arrangements with Rwanda, and concluded that they are in compliance with international law, compliant with human rights laws, refugee convention laws, and actually that Rwanda is a safe country.
And
I've just been to Rwanda.
And I know you've just been to Rwanda, but I asked you a specific question. If people go there and those conditions are not upheld, should refugees in Rwanda be able to protest at the conditions that they're in?
We've dramatically reduced the avenues for legal challenge, because what we've found is that people use, I need to get to it, and what we found is people use legal avenues in a vexatious and frivolous way to thwart our ability to remove them or detain them. We need to dramatically reduce the legal avenues of challenge.
But I'm asking you about people, if they are sent from this country to Rwanda, what would happen to them once they are there? Is it safe to send refugees to Rwanda from Britain? You sound like you are completely convinced of that.
I am convinced that it is safe to send refugees to Rwanda.
Now, the reason I ask that is that in 2018, a group of refugees in Rwanda did stage a protest because their food rations were reduced. Do you know what happened to them?
I'm not familiar with that particular case.
Okay, well, I can explain to you and explain to our viewers what happened then. According to the United Nations refugee body, a group of refugees staged a protest. The Rwandan police then fired live rounds at them, and 12 people were killed. Now, the Rwandan government says it was a last resort, there was violence at the protest, but the United Nations and eyewitnesses say that live rounds were fired. We can show some pictures of what happened in the aftermath of that protest, and we've verified the location and the date at which that happened. Are you sure still that it is safe to send refugees to Britain, and to Rwanda? And I suppose the point here is, If something went terribly wrong, would you end the arrangement with that country? Would you say, okay, you know what, that was a mistake, bring people back?
Well, as I said, that might be 2018. We're looking at 2023 and beyond. The High Court, senior expert judges have looked into the detail of our arrangement with Rwanda and found it to be a safe country and found our arrangements to be lawful. Rwanda, from which I've just returned, takes 100,000 refugees and resettles, and I met some of them in Rwanda on my recent visit from countries in the region. They have nothing but gratitude and thanks for Rwanda for the resettlement scheme that Rwanda has put on for, as I say, over 100,000 people who are fleeing persecution, fleeing conflict. They have a track record of successfully resettling and integrating people who are refugees or asylum seekers. I think we're on strong ground to say that Rwanda is a safe country. It is the right solution for us grappling with our small boats problem. And I believe it will strike the right balance of providing a humanitarian package of support for people who are refugees, whilst at the same time being a deterrent to those seeking a life in the UK.
The United Nations, though, has said very clearly that it is not a safe place for refugees.
Yeah, and the High Court disagreed with the United Nations.
And that's being challenged.
The United Nations
that's being appealed.
Yeah, and we're going through the process. I side with the court. Ultimately, they heard out, they listened to the United Nations in evidence in this hearing. They disagreed with the United Nations assessment. The United Nations continues to work with Rwanda to resettle thousands of people every year in Rwanda, regardless of those concerns. Mm-hmm. So, in my view, and in the view of the court, mm-hmm. and in the view of 100,000 people who are already in Rwanda, Rwanda is a safe country. It is appropriate for our purposes to work in partnership.
And you're determined to go ahead with it, and it's a complicated problem to solve. But I ask you again the question, if something terrible like that happened, where 12 refugees were shot at and lost their lives, if something awful happened when refugees were sent from the UK to Rwanda, would you end the policy?
What I will also say is our legislation makes provision for those extreme circumstances whereby if there is something unforeseeable, serious and irreversible harm, someone would be able to challenge the decision. We consider that to be a very outside chance, a very extreme situation, but there's always allowance in the legislation to allow for that.
In the deal as well, which we've had a good look at it, there is also a suggestion that the UK will resettle some of Rwanda's most vulnerable refugees. How many people do you expect will come to the UK from Rwanda under this scheme?
No, we don't foresee that happening.
Well, hang on, it's in the agreement. It says the participants will make arrangements for the United Kingdom to resettle a portion of Rwanda's most vulnerable refugees in the United Kingdom.
Our arrangement is very much focused on people who are coming to the UK from safe countries and unlawfully, and then being resettled to Rwanda.
But it's in the agreement then. So why did you sign it if it's in the agreement? That's what it says in black and white.
Our scheme is uncapped. It means that we can potentially send over several thousands of people from the UK to Rwanda. When I went to Rwanda, I saw with my own eyes how Rwanda is getting ready to receive these people.
And you have said that, but is there a limit on the number of people that Rwanda could send back to this country? Because you've signed an agreement that says in black and white the United Kingdom will resettle a portion of Rwanda's most vulnerable refugees.
The balance and the reality of this agreement is that Rwanda is taking people from the United Kingdom. We are resettling people who have arrived here illegally and therefore will be removed or relocated to Rwanda. As I've said, I've just seen the accommodation that's in train. They're building the housing that will be used to accommodate people who are coming from Rwanda. I visited a school that will be used to support the education.
And you've said that, but it is clearly here in black and white that the agreement you have signed also says that the United Kingdom might have to take refugees from Rwanda. But I think our viewers will hear that you don't want to address that point.
Well, no, the arrangement is very clear. On a balance and overwhelmingly, Rwanda will be taking people from the United Kingdom, not the other way around.
Okay, well, let's talk